Deep Work, Audiobook. Introduction. Right now, as you listen to this, someone somewhere is doing something extraordinary. They're not checking their phone. They're not scrolling through social media. They're not responding to the endless ping of notifications. They're deep in the zone, completely absorbed in work that matters, producing in 2 hours what takes most people an entire week. We live in the most distracted era in human history. The average person checks their phone 96 times a day. That's once every 10 minutes during waking hours. We've convinced ourselves that constant connectivity makes us more productive, more relevant, more successful. But the opposite is true. We're drowning in shallow work, email, meetings, social media, and busy work that feels productive but creates nothing of lasting value. The question isn't whether you're busy. Everyone's busy. The question is, what are you producing with your busyness? What would happen if you could focus, truly focus, for just a few hours a day on the work that actually moves your life forward? You can continue down the path of least resistance, letting your attention be pulled in 1,000 directions, ending each day drained but unaccomplished. Or you can join the rare few who've reclaimed their ability to focus, who create extraordinary value, and who are building the future while everyone else is just trying to keep up. This is your invitation to become rare, to become valuable, to become someone who doesn't just stay busy, but someone who creates work that matters. Chapter 1. Deep work is valuable. The world is currently going through a massive change called the Great Restructuring. As digital technology and machines become more advanced, the way people work is shifting in ways that were once hard to imagine. In this new landscape, the gap between what machines can do and what humans can do is getting smaller. This means that some workers will be replaced by technology, but others will become more successful than ever before. There are 3 specific groups of people who are set to thrive and earn more in this new economy. The first group includes high-skilled workers who have the ability to work with and understand complex machines. These individuals use technology like data analytics and high-speed communication to make their work more valuable. The second group consists of superstars. Because the internet allows companies to hire anyone from anywhere in the world, the person who is at the absolute peak of their field can now serve a global market. This creates a winner-take-all situation where the very best performers win the most business, while others struggle to compete. The third group includes the owners who have the money to invest in the machines and technology driving this change. Let's see what this looks like in the real world. Think about 2 software developers who graduated together 5 years ago. The first, Sarah, recognized early that artificial intelligence was transforming her field. Instead of spending her evenings scrolling through social media, she dedicated 3 hours each night to deep focused study of machine learning. No phone, no distractions. Just pure concentration on one of the hardest subjects in technology. Today, she's leading AI projects at a major tech company, earning triple what she made when she started, with recruiters constantly trying to poach her. The second developer, Mike, is equally intelligent, but he convinced himself he was staying current by skimming articles, watching YouTube tutorials during lunch breaks, and half learning things while Netflix played in the background. 5 years later, he's still doing the same entry-level work, watching in confusion as younger developers who can focus pass him by. The difference wasn't talent, it was the ability to do deep work. Or look at the superstar phenomenon. There are thousands of graphic designers in the world, but when a Fortune 500 company needs a rebrand, they hire one of maybe 10 people. Why? Because those 10 have spent years in deep, uninterrupted practice, honing their craft to a level that seems almost magical to everyone else. They're not working longer hours. They're working with an intensity of focus that transforms time itself. To join the ranks of these economic winners, an individual must master 2 core abilities. The first is the capacity to master hard things quickly. In an economy where technology changes every few years, the ability to learn is the only way to stay valuable. The second ability is the capacity to produce at an elite level. It is not enough to be talented. One must turn that talent into results that are high in both quality and speed. Mastering these 2 abilities depends entirely on the power of deep work. The science of learning shows that to master a difficult cognitive task, a person must engage in deliberate practice. This requires focusing all attention on a specific skill without any distraction. Neurologically, this intense focus triggers the growth of myelin in the brain. Myelin is a layer of tissue that wraps around brain circuits, allowing neurons to fire faster and more effectively. When a person tries to learn while distracted, such as having social media open while studying, the brain fires too many different circuits at once, which prevents it from strengthening the specific circuits needed for that new skill. Deep work is also the secret to producing work of the highest quality. There is a fundamental law of productivity. The quality of the work produced is equal to the time spent multiplied by the intensity of the focus. By working with maximum intensity, a person can produce more value in less time. One major obstacle to this is a phenomenon called attention residue. When someone switches from a main task to check a quick email, their attention does not follow them immediately. A residue of the previous task remains stuck in the mind, which makes the person less effective at the new task. To work at a peak level, it is necessary to focus on a single task for long, uninterrupted periods. Picture this common scenario. You're working on a complex report that requires your full mental capacity. You're making progress, starting to see the patterns, the insights are beginning to flow. Then your phone buzzes. It's just a quick text from a friend about weekend plans. I'll just respond real quick, you tell yourself. 15 seconds and you're back to the report. But here's what actually happened in your brain. The neural circuits that were warming up for deep analytical thinking just got hijacked. Part of your mind is still thinking about the weekend. Should you suggest that new restaurant? What time works? Meanwhile, you're staring at your report, reading the same paragraph 3 times without absorbing it. What should have taken 30 minutes of deep focus now takes 2 hours of fragmented attention. You've just experienced the cognitive equivalent of trying to sprint while dragging an anchor. Multiply this by the dozens of interruptions you allow each day, and you begin to see why you end each day exhausted but unaccomplished. Your brain has been running at full speed all day, but it's been spinning its wheels, never getting enough traction to actually move forward. Some might look at busy leaders, like those who founded famous social media companies, and think that distraction is a path to success. However, high-level executives are often the exception to the rule. In those unique roles, a person functions like a decision engine, processing a constant stream of information to make high-stakes choices. For most other professionals, following this lead is a mistake. Unless a job specifically requires constant connection, the ability to perform deep work remains the superpower of the 21st century. Those who choose to practice this skill will find themselves on the winning side of the digital divide, while those who cannot focus may find their value shrinking in an increasingly competitive world. Stop for a moment and think about your own day. Be honest with yourself. How many times did you check your phone before noon today? How many browser tabs do you have open right now while listening to this? When was the last time you worked on something truly important for 3 uninterrupted hours? If you're like most people, the answer is uncomfortable. You started your morning with good intentions, but within minutes you were pulled into email. Then Slack. Then a colleague stopped by. Then you remembered something you needed to look up, which led to 5 more tabs and 20 minutes you can't account for. By lunch, you're exhausted from busyness, but terrified because you haven't touched the project that actually matters. The one your promotion depends on, the one that could change your career, the one you promised yourself you'd finish this week. And here's what's keeping you up at night, even if you haven't said it out loud. You're watching other people pull ahead, and you don't know how to catch up. You see their output, their promotions, their success, and you wonder, how are they doing this? The answer is simpler and harder than you think. They've mastered something you've lost, the ability to focus. Chapter 2. Deep work is rare. In the current professional landscape, a strange paradox has taken root. While the ability to concentrate deeply is becoming more valuable, most businesses are actively destroying it. Large tech companies are leading the charge by moving thousands of employees into massive open-plan offices, believing that constant interaction will lead to better ideas. However, research suggests that these open environments often lead to massive distraction, where the sound of a ringing phone or a nearby conversation can ruin what someone is concentrating on. Walk into any major tech campus today, and you'll see what this looks like. Hundreds of desks crammed together, no walls, no doors, nowhere to hide. A developer is trying to debug a complex algorithm when someone 3 feet away starts a phone call about weekend plans. Another engineer is reviewing code when a colleague taps her shoulder to ask a quick question that derails 30 minutes of mental momentum. By noon, productivity hasn't just decreased, it's been executed. One programmer described his open office experience this way: "I used to be able to hold an entire system architecture in my head. Now I feel like I'm constantly rebuilding it from scratch because I can never maintain focus long enough to keep it there." He eventually started coming in at 5 a.m., not because he loved early mornings, but because it was the only time the office was quiet enough to think. The company thought they were fostering collaboration. What they actually fostered was a cognitive wasteland. Beyond physical layout, the tools of modern communication, such as instant messaging and social media, fragment attention into tiny slivers. At large corporations, millions of internal messages are sent daily, creating a culture where rapid response times are prioritized over high-quality thinking. Here's how the typical knowledge worker's day actually unfolds. They sit down with the intention of working on something important: a strategic plan, a detailed analysis, a creative project. They open their computer and immediately the notifications begin. Slack lights up, Teams pings, email floods in. Within seconds, they're sucked into what feels like productivity, but is actually a performance of availability. Are you there? Quick question. Can you look at this? Thoughts? Each message seems harmless, even reasonable, but strung together over 8 hours, they create what one researcher called the tyranny of the urgent. Important work, the deep thinking that actually moves the company forward, gets perpetually postponed because someone, somewhere, needs something right now. And because everyone else is also trapped in this cycle, the expectation becomes that you'll respond within minutes, not hours. The person who tries to batch their messages and check email only twice a day. They're seen as unresponsive, difficult, not a team player. The cruelest irony is that everyone hates this system, yet everyone perpetuates it. Ask any knowledge worker if they'd prefer fewer interruptions and more focus time, and they'll say yes immediately. But ask them to turn off Slack for 3 hours and watch the panic set in. Even prestigious news organizations now urge their serious journalists to tweet throughout the day, distracting them from the deep research and careful prose required for high-stakes reporting. The reason these depth-destroying trends persist is due to a phenomenon called the metric black hole. Unlike the industrial age, where productivity was measured in physical widgets, it is incredibly difficult in a modern office to determine the exact value produced by a single knowledge worker or the true cost of an interruption. When a company cannot see how much money it is losing through fragmented attention, it falls back on the principle of least resistance. This principle states that without clear feedback on the bottom line, professionals will gravitate toward whatever behavior is easiest in the moment. Staying constantly connected to email is much easier than the difficult work of planning a day in advance or sitting alone with a complex problem. Furthermore, because it is hard to define what it means to be productive in many modern roles, many workers use busyness as a proxy for productivity. In this mindset, if someone is visibly doing lots of stuff, responding to messages immediately, or attending endless meetings, they are assumed to be doing their job well. This culture is further reinforced by a blind devotion to all things related to the internet, where any digital tool is automatically viewed as innovative and necessary, regardless of its impact on focus. Deep work is often exiled in favor of these distracting behaviors because it builds on old-fashioned values like quality and craftsmanship that are not as shiny as the latest social media post. There's a particular kind of corporate theater that plays out in conference rooms across the world. A consultant presents the latest digital tool, a new project management app, a collaboration platform, an AI assistant. The features are dazzling. The interface is sleek. Most importantly, it's new, and newness in the digital age is confused with progress. Nobody asks the hard questions. Will this tool help us think more deeply, or just help us coordinate our distraction more efficiently? Will it create space for the challenging work that requires concentration, Or will it add another stream of notifications to an already overwhelming flood? Will it make us more productive or just more busy? The answer doesn't matter, because asking these questions makes you sound like you're against innovation. You're not being a team player. You're not embracing the future. And so the tool gets adopted, another icon appears on everyone's screen, and the collective ability to focus shrinks just a little bit more. Meanwhile, the companies and individuals who are actually winning, the ones creating breakthrough products, building industry-leading strategies, producing work that matters, are often doing the opposite. They're ruthlessly eliminating tools, saying no to platforms, and building walls around their attention. But you won't see them presenting at conferences about it, because depth isn't flashy. This leads to a world where deep work is increasingly rare. While this shift is problematic for businesses, it creates a massive personal opportunity for the few who recognize the potential of resisting these trends. Because the ability to perform deep work is now so rare, those who can master the skill of concentration will find themselves significantly more valuable in a global economy that rewards only those who can produce at an elite level. Ultimately, those who choose to cultivate a deep work ethic can dismiss the common embrace of distraction and reap the great rewards of being one of the few who prioritize depth. Think about what this means for you personally. Right now, your competitors are trapped in open offices, drowning in Slack messages, attending meetings about meetings. They're exhausted, overwhelmed, and producing shallow work. They've been swept up in a current they don't even realize they're in. But you can step out of that current entirely. Because the ability to perform deep work is now so rare, those who can master the skill of concentration will find themselves operating in a different economic reality. While others are competing in an increasingly crowded field of interchangeable knowledge workers, you'll be in a category of one. The market doesn't reward everyone who works hard, it rewards the few who produce results that matter. And results that matter come only from depth. Here's the opportunity in numbers. If you can perform deep work just 3 to 4 hours a day, you'll produce more meaningful output than colleagues who spend 10 hours in shallow fragmentation. You'll learn skills faster, solve problems others can't touch, and create work that gets noticed. Not because you're working longer, but because you're working at a level of intensity most people have forgotten is possible. The common embrace of distraction isn't a law of nature. It's a choice. And every choice creates a counter-opportunity. While the majority chooses the path of least resistance, you can choose the path of most value. While they mistake busyness for importance, you can build something that actually matters. While they're visible but irrelevant, you can be quietly indispensable. Those who choose to cultivate a deep work ethic won't just survive the great restructuring, they'll dominate it. They'll be the high-skilled workers who master hard things. They'll be the superstars who deliver elite results. They'll be the ones who don't just have a job, but a career that compounds in value year after year. Chapter 3. Deep work is meaningful. The master blacksmith Rick Furrer demonstrates how a commitment to depth produces both elite results and a deep sense of purpose. Every forcefully controlled strike of the hammer in his quiet barn requires meticulous care to prevent the steel of a Viking sword from cracking. This level of manual competence makes an individual feel quiet and easy, a satisfaction that is often missing in the ambiguous landscape of modern office work. Knowledge workers often struggle to see the meaning in their roles because tasks frequently consist of a confusing mixture of emails and presentations. However, depth remains a vital source of fulfillment in an information economy when viewed through the lenses of neuroscience, psychology, and philosophy. For most knowledge workers, the answer is uncomfortable. Your days don't feel like craftsmanship, they feel like survival. You're not forging swords, you're fielding emails. You're not creating something permanent. You're fighting fires that will flare up again tomorrow. There's no ring of hammer on anvil in your work, just the constant ping of notifications that fragment your attention into dust. Neurologically, the quality of a human life is determined by what the brain chooses to focus on. Science writer Winifred Gallagher's revelation came at the worst possible moment in her life. Sitting in an examination room, having just been told she had an aggressive form of cancer, she had a choice. She could spend the next months consumed by fear, researching survival statistics, catastrophizing every symptom, or she could direct her attention elsewhere. She chose the latter. She focused on her work, on conversations with friends, on the beauty of a spring morning. Not through denial, but through deliberate choice. And what she discovered changed everything. Her life during cancer treatment was remarkably often pleasant. Not because the cancer wasn't real or serious, but because she refused to let it occupy the center of her attention. This isn't positive thinking nonsense. This is neuroscience. Your brain doesn't have unlimited bandwidth. Whatever you focus on expands to fill your mental universe. Gallagher could have spent those months in a hell of her own making, drowning in worst-case scenarios. Instead, she built a mental world that remained livable, even beautiful, by carefully curating where she placed her attention. Now ask yourself, if someone facing cancer can choose what to focus on, what's your excuse? You're choosing to focus on your overflowing inbox, on office politics, on your competitors' social media success. And those choices are building your reality, one attention hour at a time. The question isn't whether you'll focus on something. You don't have a choice about that. The question is whether you'll choose consciously or let the loudest voice in the room make that choice for you. Psychologically, human beings are at their happiest when immersed in a state called flow. Flow is achieved when a body or mind is stretched to its limits in a voluntary effort to accomplish something difficult and worthwhile. Contrary to the popular belief that relaxation leads to happiness, research reveals that people are more satisfied while working on challenging tasks than during unstructured free time. Deep work is ideally suited to generate these rewarding flow experiences, making it a reliable path to satisfaction. This might be the most counterintuitive truth in all of psychology, and it explains why so many people are miserable despite having more leisure time than any generation in history. We fantasize about vacation, about having nothing to do, about finally relaxing. But when Friday evening arrives, when the weekend stretches ahead with no obligations, what actually happens? You scroll through your phone, feeling vaguely restless. You watch TV, but nothing seems interesting. You think about starting that project you've been excited about, but you can't seem to find the energy. The hours drift by in a haze of shallow entertainment, and by Sunday night, you're exhausted. Not from working hard, but from never engaging deeply enough to feel alive. Meanwhile, remember a time when you were completely absorbed in something challenging. Maybe you were solving a complex problem, writing something meaningful, building something with your hands, or learning a difficult skill. Hours disappeared. You forgot to check your phone, you forgot to eat. And when you finally looked up, you felt energized, not drained. That's flow. That's what it feels like to be fully human. The cruel irony of modern life is that we've optimized for comfort and ease, but comfort and ease make us miserable. We've removed all friction from our lives, instant entertainment, effortless communication, food delivered to our door, and we wonder why nothing feels satisfying. The answer is simple. Humans weren't designed for ease. We were designed for challenge, for struggle, for the satisfaction that comes only from pushing our limits. Deep work isn't just productive, it's the most reliable way to generate the flow states that make life worth living. Every hour you spend in shallow work, you're not just wasting professional opportunity. You're wasting the chance to feel fully alive. Philosophically, the practice of craftsmanship provides a way to uncover meaning inherent in the world. In a modern world that can often feel hollow, a craftsman avoids a sense of meaninglessness by learning to discern the subtle virtues and value already present in the task at hand. We live in an age of manufactured meaning. People try to find purpose through consumption, the right car, the right clothes, the right experiences documented on Instagram. They try to find it through busyness, convincing themselves that if they're constantly in motion, they must be important. They try to find it through titles and promotions, collecting achievements like they're filling a void. But none of it works. The car loses its luster in weeks. The clothes end up in the back of the closet. The Instagram likes provide a dopamine hit that fades in seconds. The promotion feels good for a day, then it's just your new normal. And the void remains, maybe even grows, because deep down you know you haven't actually created anything meaningful. There is nothing restricted to manual labor about this meaning. Any pursuit requiring high levels of skill can generate the same sense of value. Computer programmers who see the beauty in concise code, or writers who craft purposeful stories, are practicing modern craftsmanship. Cultivating such mastery is a deep task, requiring a full commitment to concentration. The human species has evolved to flourish in depth, a trait that defines individuals as Homo sapiens depenses. Ultimately, a deep life is the best kind of life available. Now, let's look at some of the rules you must follow to take yourself to the next level. Rule number 1. Work deeply. The path to peak productivity begins with understanding a fundamental truth. Willpower is not a character trait, but a finite resource that behaves like a muscle. Throughout the day, as one resists the urge to check email or browse the internet, this resource is slowly depleted. To consistently achieve a state of deep concentration, it is necessary to move beyond good intentions and establish routines and rituals that minimize the drain on this limited energy. One effective way to structure professional life for depth is to adopt a specific scheduling philosophy. The monastic philosophy involves radically minimizing or eliminating shallow obligations to focus entirely on a single, high-value goal. The bimodal philosophy suggests dividing time between clearly defined stretches of deep work and periods of open accessibility. For many in traditional office environments, the rhythmic philosophy is the most practical, as it transforms deep work into a regular habit, such as working at the same time every morning, to build a chain of consistency. Finally, the journalistic philosophy involves shifting into deep work whenever free moments arise, though this requires significant practice to execute effectively. Success in deep work is rarely accidental. It requires a commitment to ritualization. An effective ritual should specify where the work happens, how long it will last, and what rules will govern the session. It should also identify how the brain will be supported, whether through a cup of coffee, light exercise, or a clean workspace. Occasionally, grand gestures can be used to boost motivation. By making a radical change to the environment or a significant investment of money or effort, such as checking into a hotel or retreating to a cabin, the importance of a task is elevated, making it easier to muster the necessary concentration. While deep work is often a solo endeavor, collaboration can enhance the process when structured correctly. The hub-and-spoke model allows for serendipitous encounters in common areas while protecting private spaces for deep thought. Furthermore, the whiteboard effect demonstrates that working side by side with a partner on a complex problem can often push an individual to deeper levels of focus than they could achieve alone. To ensure these efforts produce tangible results, professional goals should be managed through a clear framework of execution. This involves focusing on a small number of wildly important goals and tracking progress using lead measures, such as the total number of hours spent in deep work. Maintaining a physical scoreboard in the workspace provides a reinforcing source of motivation, while a weekly cadence of accountability ensures the plan remains on track. Finally, the most productive professionals recognize the paradox that peak depth requires systematic rest. Substantial downtime is necessary to replenish the directed attention needed for concentration and to allow the unconscious mind to sift through complex challenges. To protect this recovery time, a strict shutdown ritual should be performed at the end of every workday. By capturing every incomplete task and creating a plan for the next day, the mind is released from the Zeigarnik effect, the tendency for unfinished business to dominate one's attention. Regularly resting the brain is not an indulgence. It is a prerequisite for producing work at an elite level. Rule number 2. Embrace boredom. To master the art of deep work, one must understand that the ability to concentrate is a skill that requires consistent training. Many professionals mistakenly believe that concentration is like a habit, such as flossing, which can be turned on or off with simple motivation. In reality, the brain is like a muscle that must be strengthened through regular mental strain. If the mind is allowed to flee the slightest hint of boredom throughout the day, it will be unable to achieve the deepest levels of concentration when it truly matters. Research reveals that constant attention switching and multitasking have a lasting negative effect on the brain's ability to filter out irrelevancy. Once the brain becomes accustomed to on-demand distraction, it is rewired to the point where it becomes a sucker for irrelevancy and cannot remain on task. Therefore, training for depth requires both improving the ability to concentrate intensely and weaning the mind from a dependence on distraction. A common but incomplete solution to distraction is the Internet Sabbath, where a person takes one day a week away from technology. While beneficial, this approach is insufficient because it does not change the fundamental wiring of a brain that spends most of its time in a state of distraction. Instead of taking occasional breaks from distraction to focus, the professional should take occasional breaks from focus to give in to distraction. This involves scheduling specific blocks of time for internet use in advance and avoiding it entirely outside of those windows. By segregating internet use, the mind learns to tolerate the absence of novelty and strengthens the mental muscles responsible for directing attention. Even if a job requires high connectivity, this strategy remains effective as long as the integrity of the offline blocks is maintained. The individual can also increase concentration power by injecting a dash of Rooseveltian intensity into the workday. This involves identifying a deep task and setting a hard deadline that requires blistering intensity to meet. Such Roosevelt dashes leverage artificial deadlines to help the brain systematically increase the level of concentration it can achieve. These bursts of effort are incompatible with distraction, as any slip in focus would make it impossible to meet the deadline. Over time, this practice transforms the brain's understanding of what it means to focus, allowing it to reach levels of intensity that were previously unattainable. Another effective training method is productive meditation. This practice requires the individual to focus attention on a single, well-defined professional problem while occupied physically but not mentally, such as when walking, jogging, or showering. When the mind wanders to unrelated thoughts or begins to loop over familiar information, it must be gently redirected back to the problem at hand. This structured, deep thinking process builds distraction-resisting muscles and sharpens concentration. By reviewing relevant variables and identifying the specific next step needed for a solution, the professional turns a wasted period of time into an intense workout for the mind. Finally, the mind can be conditioned through memory training, such as the effort required to memorize a shuffled deck of cards. Mental athletes are not born with exceptional memories. Instead, they use techniques that leverage the brain's natural ability to remember vivid scenes and familiar locations. Memorization requires unwavering attention and constant focus on a clear target, which incidentally improves the general ability to concentrate on any task. Whether through studying complex texts or practicing memory feats, the key is a commitment to consistent training. Ultimately, a mind that is comfortable with boredom is a mind that is prepared to produce work of elite value. Rule number 3: quit social media. The third rule for reclaiming focus involves a radical shift in how one views digital tools. In 2013, a prominent digital media consultant participated in an experiment where he disconnected from his online life for 25 days. He was exhausted by the thousands of messages and posts he had participated in over the previous year. During his time away, he discovered that the quiet rhythm of his days became less strange and his stress levels decreased. However, once the experiment ended, he quickly returned to his old habits, sending multiple tweets within hours of waking up. This cycle illustrates a common problem: the belief that one must either be fully connected or completely isolated. The current default method for choosing digital tools is known as the any-benefit approach. This mindset suggests that an individual is justified in using a network tool if they can identify any possible benefit to its use. For example, some justify using social media because it offers minor entertainment or allows them to reconnect with old high school friends. The danger of this approach is that it ignores the significant costs of these tools. These services are engineered to be addictive, fragmenting a person's attention and robbing them of the time needed for high-value work. A more effective strategy is the craftsman approach to tool selection. This philosophy suggests that tools should only be adopted if their positive impacts on a person's core professional and personal goals substantially outweigh the negatives. To understand this, one can look at a master farmer who carefully evaluates every piece of equipment. For instance, a farmer might choose to sell a hay baler, even though it provides the benefit of making hay. By evaluating the subtle costs, such as the time lost that could be spent on more profitable activities and the long-term health of the soil, the farmer realizes that buying hay is actually more efficient. Knowledge workers must learn to apply this same level of nuance to digital tools. To apply this logic, the The professional should first identify their main high-level goals and the top 2 or 3 activities that support them. Following the law of the vital few, also known as the 80-20 rule, it is often found that 80% of a person's success comes from just 20% of their activities. One must be willing to abandon tools that only provide minor benefits to the remaining 80% of less important activities. Even if a tool like Twitter offers a small marketing advantage for a writer, it may not be worth the cost if it interferes with the deep research and careful writing that drive their true success. Another powerful strategy is to perform a packing party on social media. An individual should stop using all social media services for 30 days without announcing their departure. After the month is over, they should ask if their life would have been notably better with the service and if anyone actually cared that they were gone. For many, the reality is that these services are not as important as the marketing messages suggest. Furthermore, many people are trapped in a shallow collectivist alternative to real value, where they trade likes and comments to create a false sense of importance. Dropping off these services can reveal that most of this attention is undeserved and unnecessary. Finally, it is essential to stop using the internet as a default for entertainment. Many people view their free time as an unstructured period to be filled with whatever catches their eye, such as clickbait articles and algorithmic feeds. This habit is dangerous because it weakens the mind's ability to resist distraction, making deep work harder during the day. Instead, one should structure their leisure time with high-quality activities like reading great literature, exercising, or enjoying the company of friends. As noted by thinkers from the past, the mind does not tire like a muscle. It only needs change, not complete rest. By giving the brain a quality alternative for its downtime, one can begin to live a more fulfilled and focused life. Rule number 4: drain the shallows. To thrive in a world of information, a professional must learn to minimize the logistical and non-demanding tasks that often fill a workday. These shallow efforts are easy to replicate and do not create much new value. While some shallow work is necessary to maintain a job, it must be carefully managed so it does not crowd out the deep work that determines overall impact. The software company 37 Signals provides a compelling example of how shallow work can be reduced without hurting the bottom line. For several months each year, the company operates on a 4-day work week. Despite working fewer hours, employees accomplish the same amount of work because the shorter week forces them to eliminate the fat of meetings, office politics, and unnecessary web surfing. The company also experimented with giving employees an entire month off from all shallow obligations to focus on self-directed projects, which led to significant new innovations. To achieve this level of efficiency individually, one should adopt a strategy of scheduling every minute of the day. Most people spend their time on autopilot and significantly underestimate how many hours they spend on shallow tasks like watching television or browsing the internet. By using a lined notebook to divide the workday into specific blocks of time, every minute is given a job. If a schedule is disrupted by an unexpected meeting or a task that takes longer than expected, the remaining hours should be rescheduled immediately to maintain a thoughtful say in how time is used. A professional must also learn to distinguish between deep and shallow activities. A useful test is to ask how long it would take to train a smart, recent college graduate with no specialized training to complete a specific task. If a task takes many months of training, it leverages hard-won expertise and is considered deep. If it can be learned in a few weeks, it is shallow and should be minimized. Once these activities are identified, a worker should negotiate a shallow work budget with a supervisor, aiming to keep shallow tasks between 30 and 50% of their total time. Fixed schedule productivity is another powerful tool for culling shallowness. This involves setting a firm goal of finishing all work by a specific time, such as 5:30 p.m., and then working backward to find the strategies needed to satisfy that limit. This approach creates a scarcity mindset, making a person more likely to say no to low-value commitments and to organize necessary tasks with ruthless efficiency. By ruthlessly capping shallow work, a professional can often produce more high-value results than peers who work longer, more distracted hours. Finally, mastering shallow work requires gaining control over communication, specifically email. Professionals should use sender filters, which require people who send emails to do more work or adhere to specific conditions before a response is guaranteed. This approach resets expectations and reduces the sense of obligation to respond to every message. When responding to emails, one should use a process-centric approach, identifying the project represented by the message and proposing the most efficient way to bring it to a conclusion in as few messages as possible. This method closes the loop on projects and reduces the mental clutter that prevents deep thinking. Ultimately, adopting a professorial attitude of not responding at all to ambiguous or uninteresting messages can significantly weaken the grip an inbox has over one's attention. Conclusion. Think of willpower as a physical muscle rather than a constant trait. It gets tired as the day goes on, and every time a person fights the urge to check a smartphone or an inbox, that mental energy is drained. To consistently produce elite work, the focus shouldn't be on trying harder, but on creating rituals that make focus the default choice. One way to imagine an ideal environment for this is through the eudaimonia machine. This is an architectural concept of a building where users move through a series of rooms, starting from a gallery for inspiration, through a library for research, and finally ending in soundproof chambers designed for total uninterrupted concentration. While most offices aren't built this way, anyone can simulate this flow by choosing a specific strategy for their schedule. There are 4 main philosophies for scheduling depth. First, we have the monastic approach involves cutting out all shallow distractions to focus on one big thing. The second is called the bimodal approach, which asks a person to split their time, perhaps spending a few days acting like a monk and the rest of the week being accessible to others. Then, the rhythmic approach is often the most practical for a standard job. It relies on turning focus into a daily habit, like working for 90 minutes every morning before the day gets hectic. And finally, the journalistic approach involves shifting into a state of focus whenever a few free minutes appear. Though this is a high-level skill that takes practice, success in these sessions isn't left to chance. It requires strict rituals. Effective workers specify exactly where they will work, for how long, and what the rules are, such as banning the internet during that window. They also identify how to support the brain, whether with a cup of coffee, a clean desk, or a short walk to clear the mind. Sometimes a grand gesture is needed to jumpstart the brain. This might mean checking into a hotel to finish a big project, or even booking a round-trip flight just to work without distraction. These big investments signal to the mind that the task is high priority, which helps unlock deeper levels of energy. Collaboration can also push concentration further, but only if handled correctly. The hub-and-spoke model suggests using common areas for quick chats and hubs of ideas, but retreating to private spokes to do the actual thinking. Working side by side at a whiteboard can even push a person past their normal limits of focus. To keep these habits on track, it helps to treat work like a business execution. This means focusing on a small number of wildly important goals and tracking lead measures, the actual number of hours spent in deep focus, rather than just looking at the final result. Keeping a physical scoreboard on the wall can provide a visible boost in motivation. Finally, peak performance requires a commitment to downtime. The brain needs rest to recharge the energy required for focus. It is essential to have a shutdown ritual at the end of every workday to capture every incomplete task and create a plan for the next morning. This frees the mind from the Zeigarnik effect, the tendency for unfinished business to haunt a person's thoughts all evening. By being lazy in the evenings and weekends, a professional actually becomes more capable of achieving depth when it matters most.